Hi everyone, my name is Angie Tapia, and today I'm going to talk about stress, how it shows up in our lives, and what we can actually do about it in real life. This presentation is called From Overwhelmed to In Control, and it's based on something many of us experience but don't always name, that feeling of being overwhelmed while trying to manage everything. As we move through midlife, we're often balancing multiple roles all at once, professionally, personally, and emotionally. For many of us, that includes caregiving, high expectations, and constant responsibility. Stress is something many of us experience, especially in caregiving roles, whether that's as teachers, parents, or supporting others every day. And it's not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it shows up quietly through exhaustion, irritability, or just feeling overwhelmed. And this matters because if we don't recognize it, we can't manage it. For me, this became very real when my mom had an emergency surgery, and I stepped into a caregiving role while still managing work and daily responsibilities. That shift added emotional pressure, more responsibility, and constant worry on top of everything else. What I want to share today is built around two connected case studies. The first is my self development project focused on stress management in midlife. The second is my other development project focused on caregiving and late adulthood, specifically supporting my mom after her cancerous tumor ruptured and she needed emergency surgery. At first, these felt like two separate experiences, but over time, I realized they were deeply connected. What connects these two experiences is one important idea. Stress is not just about what's happening, it's shaped by context. Caregiving increases emotional demand. Support matters at every stage of life, and awareness changes how we respond. So instead of asking, why am I so overwhelmed? I started asking, what is influencing how I'm responding right now? And this shift from judgment to understanding is what guided everything that came next. Small strategies create change. Stress is not always a bad thing. It can help us stay alert and get things done. But when stress becomes constant and unmanaged, it starts to take a toll on us emotionally and mentally. Over time, that kind of ongoing, unmanaged stress can lead to burnout, especially in caregiving roles where we're constantly giving to others. Burnout is that feeling of being emotionally drained, mentally exhausted, and sometimes disconnected from what we're doing. And sometimes we don't recognize it right away because we're still functioning. We're still showing up, doing what we need to do. But internally, we're exhausted. And that's what made it harder to notice for me because from the outside, everything looked fine. For me, stress was constant. I was functioning at about a 7 to 9 daily on a scale of 1 to 10. I was emotionally exhausted and always felt like I had to stay on. And the hard part, I was still being productive. Everything was getting done, but I wasn't okay. For me, stress didn't always show up in big ways. It showed up in small moments, reacting quickly, feeling overwhelmed, or not taking the time to pause. And I started to realize that it wasn't just about what was happening around me, it's about how I was responding to it. I was still getting things done, I was still being productive, but I wasn't emotionally okay. That's when I realized I was missing something: emotional coping. Being productive does not mean being emotionally okay. What I was missing wasn't effort. And that was hard to admit because I was used to being the person who handles everything. So slowing down didn't come naturally to me. I had to learn it. That's when I started to recognize something important. Burnout doesn't mean you're failing. It usually means you've been giving a lot for a long time. That's when I knew something had to change. One of the first things I started doing was journaling. Not anything complicated, just checking in with myself. I tracked things like how stressed I felt, what triggered it, and how I responded. At first, it felt simple, almost like it wouldn't make a difference. But writing things down helped me get out of my head and actually seeing what I was feeling. When I stepped back, I realized my stress wasn't random. It was connected to the stage I was in: caregiving, responsibility, and constant demands. And this is where developmental theory helped. Because instead of seeing stress as a personal weakness, I started seeing it as a response to my environment. It made my stress feel more manageable because I could actually understand it. And that's when I realized that stage of life, especially caregiving, requires more than just doing more. It requires self-awareness. And that's where my first strategy came in: awareness and reflection. Just noticing what I was feeling without trying to fix it immediately. Just checking in. How stressed am I? What triggered it? How did I respond? And that awareness changed everything. And that matters because when we try to fix things too quickly, we don't actually process what we're feeling. We just move on and carry it with us. Instead of reacting right away, I gave myself a moment to understand it first. And once I started slowing down and becoming more aware, I realized I didn't need to do everything at once. That's when I started focusing on small steps, because small steps reduce overwhelm and create a sense of control. So instead of thinking about everything I had to do, I focused on one task, one moment, one response. And that shift made things feel less overwhelming because it felt doable. Not fixing everything, just doing one thing and letting that be enough. And even with small steps, I realized I still needed a way to handle how I was feeling in the moment. That's when I added emotional coping. For me, that looked like journaling, walking, or any kind of movement. Something as simple as walking helped release stress. It didn't have to be long or intense walks, just stepping away, getting outside, and resetting. And I also started pausing before reacting, taking a moment to ask myself, what am I feeling right now? That small pause created space between the situation and my response. And that moment is important because it interrupts the stress cycle. Instead of reacting automatically, you're choosing how to respond, not trying to fix everything, just giving yourself a moment. And over time, I realized something important. These strategies are simple, but they only work if we use them consistently. It's not about doing everything perfectly. It's about building small habits over time. So to better understand my stress, I created a simple daily journal to track my patterns. Each day I rated my stress level. Each day I noted my main triggers. Each day I noted how I responded and whether I was using coping strategies. This helped me see patterns over time, not just how I felt in the moment, but what was actually happening instead of just guessing. And that's when I started noticing that my stress levels were gradually decreasing and seeing that change was important because it showed me that what I was doing was actually working. And that gave me a sense of control. One of my biggest insights is this: stress makes more sense in context. Emotional support matters, and small strategies create real changes. Not big dramatic shifts, just small, consistent adjustments. That is where my developmental theories connect. Vygotsky reminds us that support helps us grow. Bandura shows us that small wins build confidence. Bronfenbrenner shows us that our environment shapes behavior. Erickson reminds us that midlife is about responsibility and meaning. And attachment theory shows us that emotional safety matters and allows growth. What I realize is this: these theories don't just apply to children, they apply to us too. And as I started seeing that change in myself, I also started noticing something else. As someone in a caregiving role, I realize I can't support others if I'm constantly overwhelmed myself. Taking care of myself isn't selfish, it's necessary because it allows me to show up better, especially for my mom. In late adulthood, emotional support becomes even more important, especially during times of stress, recovery, or health challenges. And during my mom's recovery, I saw how much things like patience, presence, and reassurance really mattered. Not just solving problems, but being emotionally available. And I also realized those same things mattered for me too. It's not just about physical care, it's about feeling supported, understood, and not alone. And I saw that with my mom, that being present mattered just as much as anything else, which connects to development. Emotional connection remains essential throughout life. These small wins matter. My biggest insight is this: stress doesn't need more control, it needs understanding, not just management. And emotional coping is just as important as productivity. Small awareness leads to big changes. And going through that experience, supporting my mom and learning how to manage my own stress led me to one of the biggest lessons. Stress doesn't go away, but our response to it can change. So, my biggest takeaway is simple: growth starts with awareness, not perfection, not doing more, just awareness. If I could leave you with anything, it would be this: be gentle with yourself, celebrate small wins, ask for help when you need it, and create small moments to reset. And most importantly, remember that you're doing better than you think. Pause, reflect, and start small. Burnout doesn't mean you're failing. It usually means you've been giving a lot for a long time, and it's okay to pause. because it's not about doing more, it's about responding differently. So I want to leave you with one question. What is one behavior in your life that might make more sense if you looked at it with more understanding instead of judgment? Pause before reacting. Take one breath. Write one honest sentence. You don't have to fix everything today. Just take your first small step. You deserve peace, not just productivity. Being overwhelmed isn't a weakness, it's a signal. You are allowed to rest, you are allowed to reset, and you are allowed to rebuild without guilt. Because sometimes that one moment is where change begins. Thank you.